Folks, it's more than half a year until the first primary ballots are cast, but this week could very well be a preview of what a long slog is going to look like in 2023, with the top two Republicans attacking each other. It potentially leaves President Biden an opening to make the clear contrast that he made with swing voters, with what he would be as president. And in some ways, this debt ceiling deal, while not anything to celebrate on the left, is the kind of deal he promised he would pursue if he had to. Joining me now on set is NBC News White House correspondent and our resident Bidenologist, Mike Memoli. Vaughn Hillyard is following the Trump campaign for us in Iowa, and Dasha is quite literally in the moment following the DeSantis campaign in her car. She's not driving, I promise, and she has her seatbelt on. In South Carolina, she joins us on the road between campaign stops. But let me start with Mr. Memoli here and what the White House is thinking. Look, we talked about this before. A short term, they always think about the long game well.
That's right.
They manage short-term messaging awful.
Really bad.
and right, they have their eye on that ball, and it seems to fall into place. I don't know how much of that is just their hesitance to use Joe Biden as a surrogate.
This is strategic, they say. I mean, it's easy to say now that they've got the win.
Right.
They say if the president had been out on a daily basis attacking Republicans who he's needed to get the votes from, ultimately, to get this over the finish line, they needed to give Speaker McCarthy the space to get yeses from his own conference, they wouldn't have gotten there. And it was interesting, even Chuck Schumer was asked last night about a headline we've seen a lot this week, that Speaker McCarthy has been underestimated. Kevin McCarthy himself has been saying he's been underestimated. Well, the White House is now saying, hey, our guy has been pretty underestimated too. Right. We don't give him enough credit, they say, for all the bipartisan accomplishments he's done. And so tonight, the biggest platform a president has is an Oval Office address to the nation. And so they're planning to now start to make that argument. That
is this argument going to be to those swing voters that aren't big Biden? Maybe they're not big Democrats, but they're not big Biden fans. I mean, is he going to try to calm the left down a little bit? Does he think he has to? No,
it's really about the former, because for as much as the 2020 campaign was dominated by the wrecking ball that is Donald Trump and COVID, the Biden team thinks they won because he convinced suburban, non-political,
right,
the quiet middle of the country that he would bring back stability and normalcy to Washington.
And this, for him, is Exhibit A,
and this is
isn't it?
Exactly what that is. And so this now really clears the deck for his shadow campaign, right, that he can now run in the next summer months here to really continue to talk about those economic accomplishments. An advisor told me today he's not going to be out there talking about his bipartisan deal with Speaker McCarthy. But as they said, this is bipartisanship. Campaigns are about contrast. But one of those contrasts is the chaos in the Republican primary,
right,
while he's out showing economic progress in this country.
The fall. Right. This is the fear that I know the White House has, which is, a viral video can travel farther than any Oval Office address. Look, I think he got back up. To me, it's not a story. It's a story if he didn't get up. It's a story if he had gotten hurt. None of those things happen. How did the White House handle this? And how nervous are they about this?
This is a White House that just feels constantly star-crossed, that they can't win. One should have been really a celebratory moment for them. Really got now thrown off by the coverage. They, of course, are arguing is too much on our airwaves about this moment, but it really does underscore the challenge heading into re-election, that for as much as voters might think, hey, this guy's been a pretty good president, they're not sure he can do it for 4 more years.
Do they acknowledge that if it's not Trump on the other side, this is a much bigger problem?
They are continually saying they don't think that that's going to be the case, that Trump is going to be the nominee. But you certainly hear that from donors, that they are seeing Tim Scott and some of these new faces out there and thinking, oh, shoot.
They'll live with this issue if it's Trump.
If it's Trump.
But everything...
all those doubts reemerge in a big way.
If somehow Trump is off the stage.
That's exactly right.
Well, Trump being off the stage, an unlikely outcome at this point. Vaughn Hillyard, does anybody inside the Trump campaign at all think about how bad of a contrast this could be in a general election, the horrible Republican infighting compared to Biden getting to sort of play deal maker?
I think that this is a moment, Chuck. It's a good question here, because I think, as Mike laid out here, the efforts up on Capitol Hill of the Biden administration compared to Donald Trump, going around and attacking the most, popular governor across the country on the Republican side, it's quite a contrast. And, a lot of the voters we've talked to over the last weeks have also suggested to us sort of a little squirminess over Donald Trump going on the attack against Ron DeSantis. Two nights ago, in a local radio interview, a conservative radio host asked Donald Trump why he goes consistently on the attack against other Republicans. Last night on Fox, Sean Hannity asked him the same question. And notably, though, the crowd last night when Sean Hannity asked Donald Trump that question, they booed Hannity's suggestion that Donald Trump should take a step back. And Donald Trump made it very clear that you got to go and fight, suggesting that there are wars. And a Republican primary is a war. And we saw he did this 8 years ago, and he didn't suffer the political consequences. He won in the general election.
Speaking of that Hannity town hall, in his own softball way, the infotainment host did have a question about Mar-a-Lago. What did you learn?
Right. I think we could actually, let's play a little bit of it, and I think it's insightful into the existence of Donald Trump living in a reality that is separate from the facts that we are gathering in real time. Take a listen.
First of all, do you know who this call may be with? Do you know anything about it?
No, I don't know anything about it. All I know is this. Everything I did was right. We have the Presidential Records Act, which I abided by 100%. Biden has 1,850 boxes with a lot of classified stuff that he's not supposed to have in his case. He had 7 or 8 boxes in Chinatown in Washington, D.C., where nobody even speaks English in Chinatown. Chinatown is it's in favor of China.
I don't even know where that's going.
Chuck, you see there Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Donald Trump there. There was no follow-up question from Hannity related to any of the specifics of this Iran-related document that he had suggested that he held on to in the course of that recording. But for Donald Trump, right now, it is simply the Department of Justice that is investigating him. There is no effort by Ron DeSantis or these other Republicans to use the classified documents case, to use the Manhattan District Attorney's criminal charges, or any of these other major cases against him. And we're 8 months away from the Iowa caucus, and he continues to hold this sturdy lead.
Well, I won't call you Jake, Vaughn, but I might say, forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. Hey, very quickly, the debate, RNC put out some debate requirements. What do we think? Is Donald Trump showing up in Milwaukee for debates or not in August?
Well, our understanding was that he had no intention of showing up for the first 2 debates, but now the new thresholds just came out that really are going to make it difficult for those other candidates to not only hit the polling marks, but also they've got to get a certain number of donors to donate to their campaign to get on that debate stage. So in the scenario that it's just like a Tim Scott and Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley, there would be some pressure for him to get onto that debate stage. But, of course, the loyalty pledge is involved, and notably not a single candidate has committed to signing that loyalty pledge to support the eventual nominee. Donald Trump himself has suggested there's Republicans in this race he's not so sure about. So I don't know. Will we have a debate at all, Chuck? I'm still a little open-minded on that.
Well, it's the Midwest in June. I don't want to see you get blown away by a Midwestern storm, my friend. Vaughn Hillyard in Iowa.
It comes fast.
Yes, it does. Vaughn, thank you. All right, Dasha Burns driving right now in South Carolina following Ron DeSantis. So the most notable thing that we saw with Governor DeSantis between Iowa and New Hampshire was what he talked about in Iowa, what he didn't talk about in New Hampshire, which, of course, was abortion. What do we expect in South Carolina?
Well, look, Chuck, and just warn anyone looking to jump into this journalism job. This is how glamorous our lives are, chasing candidates around states. This is going to be my life for the next 18 months or so. But look, South Carolina, here's what's interesting. As I've been talking to voters here, this is a state that, let's not forget, Nikki Haley and Tim Scott, both from here, both presidential candidates. Both Trump and DeSantis have really been looking at this race as a 2-man race. And I will tell you, not a single voter brought up any other name besides Trump and DeSantis. This was the state where I was looking to see if they would bring up anybody else as a potential alternative. And I did not hear that. The notable difference for me at the first event that I just went to, which was just outside of Lexington, the amount of time that Casey DeSantis has spent in front of voters. She has really been front and center this week in this campaign. As we know, there's been a lot of skepticism around the likability factor for Ron DeSantis. It seems that Casey is going to be sort of the secret weapon to soften his edges, if you will. And voters have been very, very responsive. They've been telling stories about their children when he gets on stage and sits next to her in this sort of fireside chat style format that they've been doing. He softens up and he becomes much looser and kind of a different type of candidate when he's on stage next to his wife. So that's kind of the big factor that I noticed. They've spent a lot more time together on stage in this latest round of visits. The other thing, Chuck, you talked about this, the contrast that they're really starting to sharpen between him and Trump. And I was surprised to hear Trump sort of step back from the term woke and that issue, whereas DeSantis, of course, is leaning in. I had a chance to ask him about this at the rope line earlier today. Take a listen to what he said.
Great.
The former president said he doesn't like to use the word woke. He said he doesn't like to use woke because people don't know what it means. That's obviously been a big part of your messaging. What do you say to that?
Look, we know what woke is. It's a form of cultural Marxism. It's about putting merit and achievement behind identity politics, and it's basically a war on the truth. And as that has infected institutions, it has corrupted a lot of institutions. So you've got to be willing to fight the woke. We've done it in Florida, and we proudly consider ourselves the state where woke goes to die. Thank you.
Chuck, it's an interesting area where they've splintered. There's been so much back and forth between, how many terms one needs to change the course of the country,
right,
to COVID response, to Disney, you name it. This is an all-out battle now, the first time we've really seen both of them go head-to-head.
It'll be fascinating, Albie, to see if Governor DeSantis, what he does, when or if the Justice Department speaks as soon as next week. Dasha Burns in South Carolina, literally on the road. Thank you. Thanks to Vaughn, Hillyard in Iowa, and Mike Memoli right here.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.